The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description.
Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome to the command post. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. Of course, I'm your commander-in-chief, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. So, a couple of topics of discussion and items to get to today. I want to review the week of practice for the Commanders. They're now on a little brief break prior to the season, and then they're off and they're running. Time for some action. Time for some action. So I can't wait. Bart Scott, can't wait. We're getting ever so close to game week. And so this week of practice was important because it really signals us shifting away from the offseason, shifting away from training camp, shifting away from preseason. The roster is now set, and you're now shifting your focus to getting players back healthy, putting everybody where they properly belong. Remember, Dan Quinn talked about trimming down the playbook now and condensing it and focusing in on specific players and how we can feature them in certain situations. They also worked on situational football this week, red zone again, all that good stuff. Brandon Coleman is back. F.A. Obata is back on the practice field in terms of on the side field, working out, doing cardio, things of that nature. That's great to see. He's starting the season on the PUP list, but it's always good to see guys getting revved up. So I almost don't want to say this. I'm not going to say it. So it's exciting, right? We got an update on Johnny Newton. We got an update on Brandon Coleman. As I just told you, FA's, back up and running around, and he's getting into good shape. And so he'll be back sooner rather than later. It's a great time to be a Commanders fan. Okay. So we'll talk about the practice from the practices this week. And more importantly, though, we're going to focus on the two press conferences that took place yesterday, in addition to my guy Brand, who spoke yesterday, but we already talked about him. We're going to talk about Dan Quinn and Jayden Daniels. They both had press conferences yesterday. So we're going to touch on those, break those down, talk about what was said there and react to it. But first, I want to talk about Brandon Coleman, because we've talked about him quite a bit, and a lot has been made of him missing out on the preseason, all the joint practices, and us really going in blindly to this week one contest versus Tampa Bay at left tackle, because we just don't know what we're going to get. Similar to what we're, in Jayden Daniels, we have no idea what we're going to get, but at least we got to see glimpses of that in the preseason. We have no such data when it comes to Brandon Coleman. He's going to start at left tackle, folks. Wrap your brain around that. In case you didn't know, your ass better call somebody, because he's going to start week one. As long as he continues to progress, there are no setbacks. He's going to start week one. And I'm excited to see it. I'm nervous. I'd be lying to you if I told you I wasn't. I'm nervous, but I'm also ready to see what this kid can do, because there's only one way to find out if we need to draft a left tackle next year in the first round or not. And that's to put him out there and let him have at it, right? And if he's not a good left tackle, maybe he can be a good right tackle. If he's not a good left tackle, maybe he can be a good right tackle. If he's not a good left tackle, maybe he can be a really good, left guard. I don't know. You want to put this kid somewhere, right? But let's hope that he works out at left tackle, and we can scratch that off the list of needs. That's a pretty high one up on the hierarchy of things that you need to have to be successful. After quarterback, you could argue on the offensive side of the football, the next most important thing is your offensive lineman, specifically the blind side, right? At least if there's pressure off the front side on the right, from right tackle side of things, Jayden can see it and escape and dodge it and elude it and take off. Not so much the case when it's coming from your blind side and you have no idea what's happening behind you. So Brandon Coleman spoke to the media on, I want to say it was Wednesday. Shout out to Miss Perry, aka Condo P, aka Green Summer, aka Miss P. Does anybody have more aliases than Miss Perry, Miss P, Condo P? Love her to death. That's my girl. She always keeps me up to speed and abreast of everything that's happening in the world of the Commanders. And she sent me a clip of Brandon Coleman talking after practice on Wednesday. And, you know, he basically said, I'm ready to get back out there. I'm good to go. He was full go this week at practice. Wednesday practice was more of a, I would say it was more of a, it wasn't a padded practice. It wasn't, you know, where they were really getting after it hot and heavy, pause. But they were out there, you know, getting back out there on the field after their final preseason game, after all the cuts had been made, and they were settling back in after that little small break there, right? Monday, Tuesday, back out on the field Wednesday. Thursday was a fully padded practice, and he went. He had no restrictions. He performed well. Dan Quinn talked about that in his press conference. We'll talk about that here in a bit. But Coleman, you know, said, I have no limitations. You know, he said it was killing me to go through this process, see all the guys going out there, getting those reps in the joint practices, getting those reps in the preseason games, and not being able to do anything. But he said the beauty of the situation was it was a upper body injury, right, that he sustained. So lower half was fine, and he could still do the cardio. He could still do the footwork drills. He could still do all of the things from a lower body standpoint. It wasn't prohibiting him from moving. So the movement things he was still able to do. It was just he couldn't, you know, do anything with the upper half of his body. But he's like, I'm still in great shape. I'm feeling good. And now I'm ready to rock and roll. I have no limitations. I'm ready to get out there, and I'm ready to get after it week 1 versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So again, as long as there are no setbacks, we've got ourselves a starting left tackle, and we don't know how it's going to go, but we're anxious to see it take place. You know, the only thing you really worry about is the communication up front, right? Because the other 4 guys, for the most part, have been out there for much of the summer. You know, Wiley had his issues at times, and so he's missed a little bit of time, didn't play in the preseason game 1 versus the Jets, nor the joint practice that week. But he did perform, and he has been back ever since then. And he was out there for the joint practices versus the joint practice versus the Dolphins, and the game in week 2 of the preseason versus the Dolphins. So, and he made a lot of mistakes in that game that cost us, but that's nor here nor there. The bottom line is he was able to get that continuity with Sam Cosmi, continue to work on that from last year. And we can't say the same for Brandon Coleman and Nick Allegretti, who are both new here in Washington, who were looking to forge that, you know, that ability to communicate with one another. And so hopefully that's a process that over these, you know, this next week and this week that just transpired, they've been able to kind of fine tune some things. It's going to take time, right? And similar to how I feel about this team overall is I don't expect the product to look all that crisp and sharp early on in the season. I think maybe we could get lucky, catch some teams off guard because they really don't know what to expect from this group. Obviously, they're going to go back, watch Arizona Cardinals film, probably from that rookie season of Kyler Murray's, which was also Cliff Kingsbury's first season. There'll be some things they can take from that because I'm pretty sure they're going to be some things they implement from when Kyler Murray was a rookie, right? Not wanting to put too much on his plate, using him as a runner, those types of things. But also Cliff is going to, you know, integrate a lot of the things that made him successful, you know, 2 years later when the Cardinals were the last undefeated team in the NFL, made it to the postseason. And then you're going to take, you know, offensive philosophies and build them around what Olamide Zaccheaus does and what Zach Ertz does and what Terry McLaurin does and what De'Ami Brown does and what what Brian Robinson Jr. does and what Austin Eckler does. And so It's not going to be this one size fits all offense that they're going to roll out. And so we might be able to catch a team like Tampa Bay off guard and maybe even the Giants the following week. But, soon thereafter, teams will make adjustments. There'll be enough film out there for teams to analyze and break down, and then we'll have to adjust to those adjustments. And at that point, I think is when you might see this team struggle a bit, right? And so after that, you can see them maybe hit their stride, kind of figure some things out, iron out some of those kinks, and then start to play some of their better, some of their best football as they get towards the midpoint in the latter stages of the season. And that's kind of how I see the offensive line. I think it might start slow. I'm hoping that's not the case. And I'm hoping that Jayden Daniels and the threat of him being a runner, although I expect him to do most of his damage from the pocket, the threat of him using his wheels is going to take some pressure off this offensive line. And if that is in fact the case, maybe that'll allow a guy like Brandon Coleman, who hasn't been out there very much, to ease his way in to this process. But in any event, good to have Brandon Coleman back. And I'm looking forward to seeing this guy do damage out on the football field and really solidify a spot that, since Trent Williams has vacated, it has really been a spot that we just haven't been comfortable at. We've had consistency there. Charles Leno was there for 3 years, and he was very consistent there. Consistently mediocre, okay? Consistently mediocre. Now, Leno wasn't terrible, and I think some of you, blew his performances out of proportion. There were some games where he was horrendous. The Lions game in 2022 comes to mind. The Giants game in 2022 comes to mind. Yeah, those were games where he cost us pretty badly. However, outside of those games in particular, and then 2021 when he got Ryan Fitzpatrick injured, he was pretty solid. We didn't really call his name a ton, but he was basic. He's a basic left tackle. We're looking for more than that at that position. Hopefully, Brandon Coleman delivers that for us. So, let's get to the pressers. We're going to start with head coach Dan Quinn and what he had to say at his press conference yesterday, and then we'll get to Jayden Daniels and his press conference. So, one of the first topics for Dan Quinn on the table was team captains. How are you going to go about that? When are you going to make those decisions? How many are you going to have, et cetera, et cetera? And he shut that down quickly and said, not going to have team captains, going to have game captains. So each week there will be new game captains going out for the coin toss, and no one will have a C on their chest. They're not doing that. Instead, they will have guys each week designated as captains that will go out, do the coin toss. And then he said, when you make it to the postseason, you'll have postseason captains, and they'll be the captain throughout the entire postseason. So that whole discussion that we always have about captains, who we think are going to be the 7 team captains, scrap it. He said he's also going to have a group of veterans that he trusts that will almost act as leaders within the locker room, that he'll go to, sort of like a little board that he'll put together of veterans that he can go to when he wants a message conveyed to the players but doesn't want to be the one to give it. He'll give it to those players and let them disseminate it amongst their teammates. And, if they see some things going on that they want nipped in the bud, instead of them having to deliver the message all the time, it's that same board that they talked about when the players put together the standards that they talked about. I forgot the exact phrase they used, but they put together those standards that they were going to hold themselves to. And it was a veteran group of players that, really devised those standards. It's the same, probably going to be that same group, right? Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, Terry McLaurin, Bobby Wagner, Zach Ertz, Austin Eckler, those types of guys, right? You would assume. So obviously he was going to be asked about Noah Brown. He had not answered any Noah Brown questions yet. Yesterday we heard from assistant GM Lance Newmark, aka Lance Brand Newmark, and so he got some of the first questions on Noah Brown, and then DQ was able to answer those questions. I saw a clip yesterday as well of Noah Brown speaking to the media. There was a little media scrum, and he talked about assimilating himself here, and Jayden Daniels getting in some work with him after practice. We'll talk more about that here because DQ was asked about that, but DQ called Noah Brown a dog-ass competitor. And yesterday, I don't know if you guys remember yesterday, but I told you guys yesterday that I don't love Noah Brown. I like him a lot, but what I do love is his fit here in Washington. He literally embodies everything that Dan Quinn stands for in terms of being a competitor, in terms of being physical, in terms of being a guy that will do any and everything to help his team win. He's physical in the run game as a blocker, which is one of the things that he really established himself in the league as early on, especially with the Cowboys. He's a core special teamer. Again, he's cut from the same cloth, and I mentioned this yesterday, as Terry McLaurin. Remember, they went to Ohio State together, and DQ even said, I didn't know this either until DQ told me that those two were recruited in the same class at Ohio State. I just knew they were at Ohio State at relatively the same time. I didn't know if Terry had gotten there sooner, because Terry was at Ohio State for a long time, like 5 years. So I didn't know if they got there at the same time, if Terry got there before he did, if Noah Brown got there before he did. I didn't know the time frame. I just knew they were there, and their times overlapped significantly. 2, 3, 4 years they were there together, whatever the case may be. And they're very similar guys. And I said that yesterday, and DQ mentioned it again. And don't forget, DQ was with Noah Brown in Dallas. Okay. DQ spent 2 of his 3 years in Dallas with Noah Brown being on the roster. Noah Brown's only season that he wasn't there with DQ in Dallas was last year when he went to Houston. So he knows him very well, and I'm not surprised that he came here. And one of the things Noah Brown said is that he chose Washington because of the familiarity. He's like, I know a lot of the coaches there. I know, some of the players and the staff members. Obviously, he knows Dorrance Armstrong. He knows Dante Fowler Jr., right? He knows Tyler Biadasz. So there's familiar faces here, guys that he trusts, and his staff that knows him, and he knows them, and that made the process that much easier for him to make a decision to come here. Not to mention the opportunity. Our wide receiver room is not that great. So I think that had a lot to do with it as well. He talked about Zach Ertz and Austin Ekeler and, what they bring to the table. And he talked about Zach Ertz's ability in the red zone in particular, and how well he does a great job of reading players, knowing when to sit down, knowing when to continue on, just finding the holes in a defense, making himself an available and ready target for the quarterback. He said his experience has been invaluable to a guy like Jayden. They've had a lot of discussions, and Ertz has talked about that. Jayden Daniels has talked about that as well. So, he talks about his value in the red zone being particularly high. And in terms of Austin Ekeler, he's like, look, this guy, extremely gifted pass catcher. He's like, we all knew that coming in. He said, what I didn't know is just how strong this guy is. He said, pound for pound, Austin Ekeler is probably one of the strongest players on the team. And I think a lot of us were aware of Austin Ekeler's workout habits and some of his regimen. I've seen that in the past. This guy is ridiculously strong. And Quinn said, I'm just finding that out. Like, you can run this guy. He's great in pass protection. He brings a lot to the table, more than just being this change of pace, third down back that you can toss the rock to. He said, I was even very impressed with his ability to split out wide and be a receiver. I knew he could catch it. I didn't know he could run routes and actually be a guy you could move around in the formation. So this is what he said about Austin Ekeler as well. Then he was asked about Joe Witt Jr. and, what he's seen from him. Obviously, this is Joe Witt Jr.'s first time being the guy in the defensive coordinator seat. So what have you seen from him? And he said, one thing he loves about Joe Witt Jr. is that he is a man of standards and principles, and he doesn't change that for anybody or any situation. If this is how something is supposed to be done, we do it this way all the time. I give you a great example. We heard this from Joe Witt Jr. in his very first press conference when he would talk about coaches staying late, when things aren't going well and coaches want to hunker down and spend extra time. And he's saying, were you not given maximum effort before? Why do you need to stay longer? He's like, I'm going to be here as much time is needed to get the job done, and I'm going to be consistently doing that. I'm not going to change my way of approaching it because we're struggling. That means I wasn't given it maximum effort before. So you're going to get all of me while I'm here, and when it's time to leave, I'm out. Because I'm giving you everything I got while I'm on the clock. And so that's what he expects from his players. I put you on the field. I put you in a position. I want everything you got on that snap. And we'll worry about, being out of gas. I can get somebody else in there, right? But I need you giving me everything you got. I need you being sound as a tackler. I need you attacking the football. He talked about, and this is really important because I think we all get this sense from Joe Witt Jr. He says he doesn't live in the gray. There's no gray area, right? If you're supposed to be jumping this route in this coverage, they run that route, jump the route. There's nothing else to discuss. Jump the route, make a play, right? So he said, these are things that Joe hangs his hat on, and I love it, right? He holds these players to a high standard, but he's not afraid to say, hey, I messed up. That's a bad call by me. I put you guys in a bad spot. That one's on me. So, and you want that. You want accountability across the boards from players and coaches alike. He talked about Brandon Coleman, and he said, Brandon Coleman, and we're going to call him BC from now on. All right. Or B Cole, either one, right? So he talked about Brandon Coleman, and he said, look, BC is ready to go. No limitations. He was out there. He said, I went and checked on him, asked him how he felt. He told me he felt tremendous. So, as far as I'm concerned, we got nothing to worry about there. Now it's just about him getting acclimated, getting his feet wet, getting back into the swing of things, and getting ready for, the upcoming season. And then he went from that conversation straight into the health of this team. And I didn't want to mention this earlier, but Dan brought it up, not me. Don't kill the messenger. But Dan said that, after Coleman coming back, we're pretty much healthy outside of Jordan McGee. And he's like, McGee's going to be back. He's not even hurt for the entire season. So he's like, man, it feels good to get to the starting blocks with all of your stuff. And I really, truly believe this. And I hope the football gods don't make an ass out of me here. But the football gods have a lot of catching up to do with us in particular. Like, I'm not saying that the football gods owe us anything, because they don't. A lot of the things that have happened over the last quarter of a century have been self-inflicted. And so we have no one to blame but ourselves for the ownership and their role in all of this, for the players that they've picked, for the people that they've employed. It's been all bad, and it's been all us for the most part. But I feel like there is a lot of good juju that is supposed to come our way, because we just haven't gotten a lot of it over the last 25 years. And I think we've been really banged up, the last 3 years or so. And there are other teams that can probably lay claim to being way more banged up than us. But, for our situation, with us not having a lot of talent to begin with, you can't take our stuff from us. And they've taken stuff from us over the last few years. So I think we're due for some good health. I really do. And we're off to a great start, and I'd love to say that, it's largely due to, new ownership coming in here, Josh Harris coming in here and getting some of the best doctors and, best medical practitioners out there in the business, practitioners, and coming in here and having, them change everything. And that might very well be the case. But we got to see it through first before we can start handing out adulation and accolades and acknowledgments. Let's see how it goes. But we're off to a great start. I can tell you that much. On Johnny Newton's recovery, he said that, and remember, he told us before, and this was like a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks ago, Brandon Coleman was slightly ahead of Johnny Newton, and that's played itself out. Now, he said, look, they've got different injuries. It's not like they had the same injury and one was ahead of the other. They're different injuries, but Coleman's recovery time was ahead of that of Johnny Newton. And you see that now. Coleman's back on the field and he's practicing in full with no limitations. Newton, on the other hand, is back on the practice field with F.A. Obata on the side field, getting in conditioning work, but he's still not, and he's cutting and he's changing direction, but he's still not ready for contact quite yet. All right. So now they're testing out the soft tissue injury as far as how does it do with cutting, changing direction, stopping, starting, planting, all of that stuff, and driving, right? So then the next part that they're going to integrate is now how does he deal with contact? Somebody pushing, leaning on him using force, pushing off, and how does that injury feel after that? They're going to get into that next week, he said. Test him out early in the week, see how he feels, and as the week progresses, they'll know if he's able to go in week 1 or not. But he said he's very, very close to being ready to go, but they're not going to rush him because this is a long haul thing. They're in it for the long haul. They're not looking to get him back like Ronald was with Curtis Samuel, rushing to get him back, and as soon as he got back, because he wasn't ready, he was hurt again, and he was in and out of the lineup that first year Curtis Samuel was here. They're not looking to do that. They want him to be healthy for the long haul. And so with that said, there was another question that kind of went with that, and I'm going to skip to that one now. It was a little bit later in the press conference, but it makes a ton of sense now. So let's get to that. Defensive tackle depth. This was part of the reason I did not want to trade John Ridgeway, because we weren't sure about Johnny Newton's health. I didn't mind them trading John Ridgeway if they knew he wasn't going to play. But more importantly, and they told us this without directly telling us this, they literally told us this. They said, we wanted to give him a chance to play more. He wasn't going to play a lot here. And we wanted to put him in a position where he was going to be a better fit. So they're telling you he didn't fit their scheme. This is why he didn't make the team in Dallas. Why? Because he's a big, physical, plodding guy. He's not and this athletic dynamo that can get in the backfield, be a one-gap penetrator. That's not who he is. All of our defensive tackles are one-gap penetrators that can get up the field and be disruptive. John Ridgeway is a stack and shed monster. That's not what Dan Quinn wants his guys doing. He wants them playing on the other side of the line of scrimmage and creating havoc up front and creating chaos and disarray. He wants them wrecking shop and getting in the backfield. He doesn't want guys standing up a blocker and then tossing them aside. He wants them getting to the football, right? So that's why they traded him. So they went out and he said, look, we don't know if Newton's going to be ready, but we feel good about our guys. And then we did add depth, which they added 2 defensive linemen in onto the practice squad. We talked about it. Sheldon Day, I told you, an undersized defensive tackle from Notre Dame, who's a veteran, been around the block quite a few times. I loved him when he was at Notre Dame, and I thought he's going to be a much better player than he has been in this league. And so he's going to help provide depth. Same with Carlos Watkins, who they also signed to the practice squad. So he's like, if we need to tap into the practice squad, we can. But right now, we don't know if that's going to be the case because Brandon Coleman or Johnny Newton could be ready next week for all we know. So it's kind of early to talk about the defensive tackle depth as far as whether we need to do something or not. But if need be, we have a guy on the practice squad that we can pull up. But we don't know if we're going to need to do that or not yet. So DQ talked about being a developmental staff. And what that entails, he said, look, because the question was more so geared towards Jayden Daniels and the ups and downs and, the bumps and bruises that come with a young quarterback. And he said, look, at the end of the day, we're a developmental staff. So not only are we going to take these rookies, we're going to take Jayden Daniels and all the rookies and look to develop them. We're looking to develop the veterans as well because they're in a different scheme. They're doing things differently. We're asking them to do things differently. So we need to develop them as well. And he's like, what we want to do is be a staff that we look back 10 years from now. We say, look at that rookie class. Look at how they've developed. Look at how they've grown. And some of them might be really good in their rookie season, but at the end of the day, we're all about teaching and getting guys better in our scheme and how we do things. And we want to get to a point where we stack these good days on top of each other, good years on top of each other, till we get to a point where it's ingrained in our organization that this is how we do things. This is how we develop our players. So that's what being a developmental staff is all about. He talked about his process. He's like, I don't want to, you hear coaches talk about this. I know I've heard coaches talk about after the second preseason game, they start focusing on their week 1 opponent. And he's like, I don't want to do that. I want to stay in the same process at all times. So he's like, we still haven't started prepping for Tampa. We were more so focused on our roster this week. We weren't really concerned with Tampa Bay and what we need to do to try to beat them this week. That's what next week is for. This week was about taking the install from the entire offseason and trimming it down and getting it to fit our team. This week was more about getting Brandon Coleman back on the field and getting him integrated with the offensive line. This week was getting the defense, getting all those pieces together and figuring out how you're going to use them out on the football field. This week was more about us. Next week begins the process of worrying about other teams. And it'll continue throughout the rest of the season. There will not be another week where they won't be focusing in on an opponent except for the bye week. That's where a lot of self-evaluating, self-scouting goes on. But outside of the bye week, that doesn't take place till week 14, I may add. Again, they screwed us 3 years in a row. And it could end up being a gift, but right now it's a curse because we haven't done anything with the week 14 bye. Maybe this is the year that it turns around and that thing rejuvenates us, gives us a spark down the stretch to finish the season strong and maybe make a playoff push. Who knows, right? We'll see. He talked about being organized. DQ talked about how after every process that they've had this season, so he said after he got hired, he took notes. After the free agency period, he took notes. After the draft, he took notes. After minicamp, he took notes. After, training camp, he took notes. After joint practices, he took notes. After the preseason games, he took notes. And he said he wants to be very organized and detailed so that next year in 2025, when they sit down and they do some things, he's like, hey, how can we be better? How can we take the things that we did last year and improve upon them? Or some of the things we did really well last year that we liked. How do we continue to do that? I don't want to be thinking in my head, oh, well, how did we do it last year? I got it right here in my notes, right? So he wants to continue to be organized and detailed. He says, so these were two really good questions. One question that was asked was, where is the team situationally? So the question was, let me rephrase this. The question that was asked of him was, are you comfortable where the team is right now? How comfortable are you? And so he broke it down in two things. One, where he's a position where he's comfortable with where the team is at, and then another situation where he's not comfortable where the team is, right? So he's comfortable where the team is from a situational football standpoint. Y'all know how I feel about situational football. I've been bitching about situational football since Ronald Rivera and Scott Turner got here. Scott Turner's biggest flaw, his fatal flaw, if you ask me, Scott Turner wasn't a terrible offensive coordinator, contrary to popular belief. I think he knew offensive football. He knew how to get guys open. I didn't love his running scheme, right? Because everything was out of the gun. So I didn't love that. And I didn't think he had good play action fake because everything was out of the gun. However, guys were open. And we just didn't have the quarterbacks to give him the football. But his biggest flaw was situationally, he was ignorant. He didn't get it done in, 2-point conversions. We were awful under Scott Turner, right? Because situationally, he's not good. We weren't good in short yardage situations after the first season. When we had Peyton Barber, we were really good. After that, and even when we had Peyton Barber in 2020, I remember the Steelers game, and I always bring this up. Instead of giving it to Peyton Barber on first down from the 1, he threw the football. Instead of giving it to Peyton Barber on second down, He threw the football. Instead of giving it to Peyton Barber on third down, he threw the football. Instead of giving it to Peyton Barber, who had been killing it that year, he threw it on fourth down. And if not for a holding penalty on TJ Watt, we would have turned it over on downs. On the first fresh set of downs, he hands it to Peyton Barber, who scored a touchdown. I'm like, bro, you could have done that 4 plays ago, right? Situationally, he was awful. We weren't good in late game situations, i.e. the Tennessee Titans game from 2022 that we had no business losing because Ronald wasted a timeout challenging a play that he shouldn't have challenged. Ronald got bailed out by Terry McLaurin, who caught a pass, should have been tackled in bounds, broke a tackle, got out of bounds, and saved us a lot of clock, or else we wouldn't even been in a position to have all those cracks at the end zone. Situationally, we've been awful. I love hearing Dan Quinn talk about situational football. Just being better when it matters the most. And it matters the most in specific situations. 2-minute drill before the half. 2 minutes at the end of the game. 4-minute offense at the end of the game. How many timeouts do I have? When to use those timeouts, right? Love the fact, red zone, 2-point conversions, right? Inside the 5, inside the 10. These are critical situations. 3rd and 2, 3rd and 4. These are critical situations. That's the difference between winning and losing a game. How did you convert on third downs? I always look at the third down stats after the game. We talk about them on the post-game show because those are indicators for me. Turnovers and third downs. You don't convert on third downs, you're not going to sustain offense. You don't sustain offense, you're probably not going to win the football game. Unless you score on explosives, which we haven't done in centuries, since the Gruden administration, okay? We don't score on explosives. So you better be sustaining offense. So situationally, he feels good about this team. He said where he doesn't feel as great is at the line of scrimmage on both sides. But he said it's not specific to this team in particular. He said every year he goes into the season not 100% sure the team is ready from a physicality line of scrimmage standpoint on both sides because you just don't get that kind of work anymore with the way the CBA is set up. Guys aren't hitting as much. And so there's a lot of these practices that have skill player aspects to it where, you know, the skill players are getting a ton of work. Corners, safeties, running backs, tight ends, receivers, quarterback, getting a ton of work. But the poor defensive line and offensive line, they only get to really hit and go after it when it's a fully padded practice. We only had like 7 or 8 fully padded practices during training camp. You know, if that many. That might be too many. So, again, a lot of times they're not really hitting. They're not being physical in the trenches. He's like, I'm not sure if we're, you know, where I would like us to be, but we'll get there. DQ talked about Jayden pulling him aside and asking if he could throw to Noah Brown after practice. And he said, that's just another sign of the leadership and why we believe Jayden is going to be really good for a long time. You want your quarterback taking the initiative. We didn't have to tell him that. We didn't ask him to do that. He came to us after practice and said, hey, do you mind if I take Noah and get some extra reps after practice? And he's like, hell no, go ahead and do it, man. We really appreciate you asking and trying to expedite that process. And he said, this is why this kid's going to be special. Because we didn't ask him to do that. And not everybody thinks, let's go get some reps. Love it, man. Love it. He talked about Cade York. And I think he said Cade York had a big leg at least 5 times, which he does. And he's very excited about Cade York, as am I. Cautiously optimistic about him because for the first time in a long time, I think we got a shot to have a kicker for a long time. Like usually we are the team that, and I was still advocating for this. We're the team that gets the kicker when he's not ready to be that consistent kicker for you yet, but he's got all the intangibles and he's got all of the qualities that make up a really good NFL kicker, but he's just not ready to be consistent yet. We got the Graham Ganoes and we got the Dustin Hopkins and we got the Sean Sweezums and all of these kickers that ended up being really good NFL kickers for a long time. They were here first. They just weren't ready to be good NFL kickers yet. And so we were the ones that allowed them to grow into the position, but we had to take the growing pains so that other teams could benefit off of our struggle and strife, right? This is why I say the football guys don't owe us anything, but it's probably a few nice positive nuggets that they got in there for us because of shit like that, right? And all of that stuff happened because Daniel Snyder was our owner, and you got to take these L's, bro. Well, he's no longer here, and I think it's some dubs waiting for us now. Some unexpected dubs. This could be one of them. I really feel like this Cade York signing is going to be one of those unexpected dubs that comes along and you go, hey, who would have thought we would find a guy that's been kicking for us the last 9 years, 1 week, 3 weeks before the 2024 NFL season? Who knew? We're having this conversation in 2020, in 2033. Who knew we would find this guy and he'd be one of the best kickers in franchise history? I know that's a lot, but it could be. Or as a wise kid used to say, hey, it could happen. And then finally, he finished up his presser by talking about the wide receiver group. And he said, you know, I know there's been a lot of discussion about the receiver group over the last, week or so after the Jahan trade, et cetera, but he's like, I feel really good about this group. They come in all all sizes, different types of sizes and shapes. But he said at the end of the day, we feel really good about their versatility, right? He's like, Terry can play all over the field. Olamide Zaccheaus is a guy that can play inside and out. He's like, Luke has done some really good things in the slot for us. He can also go outside. Jameson Crowder he's a really good slot receiver. Byron Pringle has shown us some things here of late. And so we feel really good about that group. But he's like, it's not just the receivers. And I can't stress this enough. It's like, it's not just the receivers, it's the entire offense. And we feel good about the guys that we have on this roster. So that was DQ's presser in a nutshell. So now let's get to Jayden Daniels' press conference. But before we do that, let's pay some bills. I have a sponsor for this show, Chubbies. Let's get a word from one of our sponsors, and then we'll come back on the other side and tackle Jayden and any comments that you have. What's going on? It's your man Louie T here on behalf of Chubbies. We've all heard the old adage, look good, feel good, play good, play good. Well, you know the rest. I'm here to focus on the first two, looking good and feeling good. And Chubbies has you covered on both fronts. Let's talk about why Chubby has you prepared to have fun under the sun while feeling good and looking good. Let's start with their original stretch shorts. Ridiculously comfortable shorts that come in 3 different inseam lengths, made with some of the stretchiest fabric I've ever felt in my entire life. They've got their Friday shirts line. From casual button-downs to retro-inspired prints, these shirts check every box, from great looks and design to extreme comfort. Chubbies is most known for their classic line swim collection, available in a ton of ultra vibrant colors and patterns, built with a quick drying 4-way stretch fabric, elastic waistband, and an anti-chafe mesh liner. If you're a male, you know all about chafing. You want no parts of it, so that is very important. And then get this. This is an extra throw-in. This is that luxury stuff I'm talking about. A zippered back pocket on your swim trunks. How about that? So here's my testimonial. Went to St. Thomas here recently for my granny's 89th birthday, and we had a blast on the beach, and I broke out my Chubbies gear and had a blast doing it. It was so hot there, and I needed clothes that were going to fit me well, but allow my body to breathe. And that's exactly what the Chubbies gear did exactly for me. I was able to go out, have a good time, mingle, not worry about sweating up a storm, not worried about being uncomfortable, not being able to stretch in this direction, as you can see, bending down there and taking pictures with people. I didn't have to worry about any of that because I had this stretchable, breathable fabric that felt so good on my body. For a limited time, our friends over at Chubbies are giving my viewers 20% off when using the promo code LouieT at checkout at chubbiesshorts.com. That's right, 20% off of your purchase at checkout when you use the promo code LouieT at ChubbyShorts.com. That's ChubbiesShorts.com. Look good, feel good. Chubbies got you covered on both fronts this summer and fall. You guys are hilarious. Hilarious. I was dying the entire time the promo was being played. I did such a poor job with that promo yesterday. I rushed it. I thought I could just do a quick little, throw up and get it done. And it was awful. And I was so embarrassed at how poorly that went. So I was like, I had to run it back and actually do a real promo. So I appreciate y'all supporting the kid. Go to ChubbiesShorts.com. I'm telling y'all, I wouldn't lie to y'all. And I always endorse products that I believe in. I don't endorse things that I don't believe in. These are some great products. The shorts are excellent. The shirts are extravagant. They feel great. Again, I can't stress to you how good it feels to put on dry fit material, essentially, which is what that feels like. And I was laughing at y'all. Lotionless Lou, really? The jail pose, really? You guys are hilarious. Hilarious. Anyway, I digress. Let's get to Jayden Daniels' presser. And he talked about his mindset going into the his first NFL game. And he said, look, I feel like, and this is why I love Jayden Daniels, man, because he's got a perspective. Like, I feel like if I were a high-level athlete like him, I would have the same mindset that he does. He gets it. He's down to earth. He understands what his role is. He understands how to bring and galvanize others, right? Bring everybody in, galvanize everybody, not make himself feel like he's above the rest of the team, just kind of trying to fit in, be one of the guys. He understands that eventually he's going to take on a leadership role, but it's hard for him to do that day one, walking in the door as a rookie, right? And he talked about, look, I'm just going to go out there and play my game, man. This is what's gotten me here. I've put the work in. And I know what I'm capable of. I know what my teammates are capable of. I know I don't have to do everything myself. He said, look, there's going to be ups. There's going to be downs. I'm going to have my growing pains. I'm a rookie. I'm going to make mistakes, and there are things that are going to go really well for me. There are going to be things that, I don't do as well. But, at the end of the day, it's all a process. And I'm ready to take on that challenge and go through that process and come out on the other side as a better quarterback because of the things that I went through. And so I'm just going to take it one game at a time, and he's ready for the challenge, man. Like you can't answer these questions any better than Jayden Daniels does, right? Anyway, I digress. So they asked JD5 what he thought about the Jahan Dotson trade. And he said, look, John, he said, Han, that's my boy. That's my brother. Always have love for him. I wish him nothing but the best, and that was pretty much it. He didn't really have anything to add. Like, it's the NFL. At any point, anything can happen. They didn't see it coming, but it is what it is. And he said, I wish him nothing but the best, right? They asked him about Zach Ertz and, what Zach Ertz has meant to him thus far. And I've told you guys this, the best friend of a rookie quarterback is a tight end. He is the security blanket for a young quarterback because he's the first guy that you see right over the football. If all else fails, you look out wide and your guy's blanketed. You look inside to the slot receiver. You're not getting open. You can go right over the middle of the field. The tight end's right there. You can get it to him, right? If it's 3rd and 3, who's the guy you're looking for? The tight end, because he's a big body. It's quick, and it's easy for you to get it out of your hands and get it to the tight end and move the sticks, right? So he said Zach Ertz has been a security blanket for him. And he loves Zach Ertz. He said he loves his perspective on the game. He said he's been picking Zach Ertz's brain. Ertz has told us that he's had a lot of conversations with Jayden so that they can see the game the same, right? And Ertz is telling him, hey, this is what I see when you get this kind of coverage. This is what I'm going to, these are the things that I'm going to do to try to make your job easier. And so they've been having that back and forth dialogue. And he said that it's been important to pick the brain of guys like Ertz on the offensive side and Bobby Wagner on the defensive side so that he knows, okay, this is what the defense is looking for. So if they see this is a tell, I'm not going to do that. So they can't know this is what I'm going to do with the football, right? So he talked about Ertz really being a stabilizing force for him as he's grown in this offense this summer. On building a relationship with Noah Brown, he talked about, throwing with him after practice and trying to speed that process up, knowing that this guy's probably going to be a contributor at some point this season. Maybe not early in the season as he gets up to speed on what it is Washington's going to be doing, but eventually we're probably going to have Noah Brown out there. And like I said, you want to throw these bubble screens to guys like De'Ami Brown and Terry McLaurin and Olamide Zaccheaus. You need a guy out there, a dog that's going to block and put somebody's dick in the dirt like Noah Brown. And so this guy's going to get up to speed, and Jayden's like, we're going to put in the work. And he said, it's going to take a while. I don't expect this to happen overnight, but we're going to put in the work to get him where he needs to be so he can be a contributor on this team. He talked about Austin Eckler. And the same thing, applies here with Eckler that we talked about with Zach Ertz. Eckler is a veteran, played a lot of football, a guy that can catch it out of the backfield. And he said, just another guy that has been able to give me a little bit of his knowledge, been a veteran presence, a guy that I can lean on when I got questions. And, he's another guy that I feel really good about on this offense that I can trust getting the football to, and they're going to make something happen. He talked about his first NFL game and how he's going to feel. And then he gave his thoughts on Tampa Bay in particular. I want to couple in two answers. So there's another answer a little bit later on in the presser, but I'm going to couple it in here because I think it makes a lot of sense. Because I felt like this was one of the press conferences where the questions were somewhat redundant. They were asking a lot of similar questions. Like they asked him about, how you're going to feel for your first NFL game like 3 different times and just asked him in different ways. So he started, you could tell that it was, he was like, how many times y'all gonna ask me the question? Because he did that classic JD5 smirk, like, yeah, I already answered that twice. But some people come into the press conferences late, right? And if you gonna come in late, then you should be obligated to hit me with the standard operating line of, hey, I'm sorry, forgive me if this has already been asked. I just got here, but, and then ... ask your question, right? Anyway, he said that, he's going to have butterflies. And I think that's a natural emotion. He's like, I'm going to have butterflies at kickoff. After kickoff and I get out on the field and we take that first snap, I'm good. It's just football at that point. I was watching Hard Knocks and Caleb Williams says, I don't get nervous. Yeah, I haven't been nervous at a football game since high school. I'm like, that's bullshit, bro. You can sit here and try to sell that shit because you on camera and, I'm a tough guy. I don't get nervous. You get nervous, bro. We all get nervous. Now, I can't tell somebody how they feel, but I don't care how long you've been doing something for. It is a natural emotion to get those butterflies in the pit of your stomach right before you're about to embark upon something that you've done 1,000,000 times. And then it's going to go away because it's like riding a bike. Once you get on, it's just like your nature just takes over, right? It almost becomes involuntary, right? Where you don't even think about it. But this bullshit, you tell me you don't get nervous. We all get nervous, right? And he's like, but once I get out there, I'm not going to be nervous anymore. And he's like, I don't need to feel like I got to do everything. I don't need to feel like I got to put my cape on, to lead this team. I can lean on my teammates. I know that these guys are playmakers. I know the defense can handle their end of the deal and special teams as well. I don't have to go out there and do everything. I got my team around me. I know what we're capable of. I know what I'm capable of. And I think we're just going to go out there and play. And as far as Tampa's concerned, he was like, hey, look, I know Todd Bowles can be diabolical over there as a defensive mind. So we got to be prepared. They got Levante David. Look, this kid is a student of the game. I knew he was a student when day one he got here and he talked about Doug Williams and his role and impact in this organization. And he talked about the history of the Commanders, the Redskins. And he was spot on. There's so many guys. What bothers me a lot about players sometimes is they don't even know the schedule, right? Like Jayden in his last press conference was like, I can't wait till September 15th, right? That's our first home game against the Giants. Everybody's focused on the 8th. And he's like, I can't wait till the 15th to play in front of the home crowd because he didn't play in the preseason at home, right? Didn't play in that third preseason. Only 2 games that he played in were on the road. So he still hasn't played in front of the faithful. So he's like, I can't wait till the 15th. You know how many dudes don't even know who we play on the 15th? You know how many dudes don't even know that our first home game is on September 15th in week 2? Like, the fact that he knows who Tampa Bay's defensive coordinator is, he knows Levante David is the general on that defense, and that they've got a good front, and we got to be prepared. Like, I know that's a basic statement, but it's a lot of dudes that are ill prepared, that don't know. He's not one of them. He talked about being himself and not trying to do too much and involving his teammates. That's kind of, what I just said. Like, he talked about, look, I don't have to go out and try to do too much. Play within the scheme, play within myself, trust my teammates, and we'll be just fine, right? That's the right mentality to have. There'll be a time when we need you to break out the cape. There'll be times. But for the most part, let your teammates do the heavy lifting. Get the ball out of your hands. Let the playmakers make plays. And trust me, it'll take care of itself. He talked about, so this was a light moment. This was funny. There's this ongoing thing between him and Bobby Wagner, who's the better basketball player. And so the question was asked, Bobby Wagner said that he's a better basketball player than you. What is your response to that? And is that true? And he's like, he laughed, right? And he's like, that is a false statement by Bobby Wagner. He's not a better basketball player than me. So there's been this back and forth thing between those two, and that's funny. And you can tell that they have those discussions all the time about who's better in basketball. He talked about his first NFL training camp, and he said, you know what? It was a little bit different than college. He's like, in terms of the preparation, it was the same. I went through my process, and, it was, at times grueling, but, it's training camp. But he said the difference in college is you don't play another team until your first game of the season, and that game counts. There's no preseason in college football. You're going against your teammates the whole summer, and then your first game of the season is against some, poor, destitute institution that you paid money to beat up on, like Southeast Missouri State, and then you work your way into some of the tougher games, right? It's changed for some programs in college where their first game isn't against some chump cupcake opponent, but rather against a really good team, and then you get the chump opponent the next week after that, right? But he's like, in the NFL, training camp's different. You're seeing teams in joint practices, preseason games. And so he's like, that was pretty cool to go up against other teams and other players that weren't your own, to kind of give you a sense of what it's going to feel like when you get to the actual game. So he's like, I did appreciate that. And that was different. But, I felt like I prepared myself the same way I did when I was at LSU. He talked about being worried about the lack of O-line depth, which he said he is not. He said that he trusts, Adam Peters and Dan Quinn to put the best players out on the field, and everybody's going to do their job. And he's got no doubts that the offensive line would do their job and be ready when they're called upon. And he's like, I'm just going to go out and do my job, and I know they're going to do their job, and I'm not worried about anything. So, which is how he's supposed to feel, which is supposed to be the answer, right? So then I thought this was a dumbass question. Like, somebody asked him on DQ being real. Like, what the hell does that even mean, right? Of course, DQ is authentic, but DQ's being real. How do you feel about DQ being a real head coach? And Jayden smirked, like, I mean, yeah, he's authentic. He is straightforward. He's transparent. He lets you know where you stand, and that's what you want out of a coach. Yeah, I mean, like, what else am I supposed to say? That DQ's my guy. I respect him. I love him. And yeah, he's a real coach. But kind of a question is that, right? Like, okay. Anyway, JD5 is ready. We'll hear from him again once more before the season starts next week as they prepare for Tampa. And then we get into our, regularly scheduled programming, and we get into our rhythm of quarterback and head coach on Wednesday, coordinators on Thursday, yada, 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 right? So we'll see how they do it, because every staff is different. We may not hear from, each coordinator on the same day. We could hear from, DQ and the quarterback on and JD5 on Wednesday. We can hear from the defensive coordinator on Thursday. We can hear from the offensive coordinator on Friday, or vice versa. Or, we could hear from the head coach and the quarterback Wednesday, coordinators on Thursday, and you might get special teams coordinator on Friday, or you might get this coach or that coach on Friday. Who knows? We'll see. Looking forward to seeing how they decide to do it this year. And then, you usually get players during the course of the season too. Jonathan Allen, Daron Payne, Terry McLaurin, whomever they decide to give us during the course of the week as well. So that was Jayden's presser along with DQ's. Let's get to the comment section. See what you guys have to say before we get out of here. Charles Horn, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Charles writes, is Brown an upgrade from Dotson or more of a lateral move? We can't say right now. I think most fans would say that it's neither, right? It's a step back, most fans would say, right? From a production standpoint, Jahan in his first 2 seasons, way more productive than Dyami Brown has been, and it's not close. However, that doesn't mean Dyami's not capable, but we haven't seen it. And so to call him an upgrade or even a lateral move would be negligent on our part, because we haven't seen it. He's got to show us. And he hasn't done that to this point. I believe Dyami's fully capable, but again, we got to see it first. So I don't think he's either of those. He's probably more of a step backwards until he proves otherwise, right? Tizzy Bang, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Who writes, could you see Travis Hunter playing both sides of the ball in the NFL? If not, what position is he best at? No, I don't see him playing both sides of the ball. There have been guys that have been elite athletes that have come into the NFL, and they haven't played both sides of the football. The game has not changed to allow players to play both sides of the ball. It's excruciating to play on one side, let alone both sides of the ball. You don't want to run a guy into the ground. There may be spots that they pick to do it, but if he's a defensive player, then I'm pretty sure they'll have, certain sets where they get him in there and get him a touch because he's dynamic. But, similar to Charles Woodson in his young career, and Deion Sanders when, he was young in his career, they get him touches as an offensive player. But at the end of the day, he's a wide receiver. He's a better wide receiver than he is a cornerback. So I think most teams will see him as a wide receiver, and that'll be the position that he'll ultimately play at the NFL level. Wilfredo Elias, been a member for 27 months. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, Lou, Wilfredo says, you're the GOAT. No, I appreciate you. Thanks for all you do, and I'm glad to see this channel continuing to prosper. No one deserves it more. I appreciate that, man. It's been a long time coming, man. It feels good, Not going to lie. Here's to another year and hopefully the first of many great years under AP and DQ. Cheers. I got my cup of tea right here. Cheers. I'm right there with you, man. We had our cheers to the season, and I think we had some sort of a toast that was very similar to that, right? Cheers to a great upcoming season and hopefully the first of many to come, right? Thank you for some of that love, Wilfredo, man. Really appreciate you. Speaking of Wilfredo, thank you for your generosity, gifting 5 memberships. Shout out to Wilfredo Elias for gifting 5 memberships. Shout out to all of the brand new members of the MOBB, courtesy of Wilfredo Elias. Stand up. All of you are now in the building, courtesy of our guy, Wilfredo Elias. Once again, thank you for your generosity. Prince G, thank you for your generosity. Stand up to the newest member of the MOBB, whomever was blessed by Prince G. Thank you for your generosity, Prince G. Greatly appreciate you. Rob, thank you for all that you do here on the Louie T Network. And thank you for your generosity, blessing 5 new members out there, gifting those memberships. Really appreciate you, Rob. Thank you for your generosity. Stand up. 5 new members are now in the building with the mob, courtesy of Rob. Zay the Man, thank you for your generosity, gifting 5 memberships. Greatly appreciate you. My guy, Zay the Man, you are the man for your generosity. Stand up to those 5 new members. You are officially in the building as new members of the MOBB, courtesy of Zay, the man. You are the man, Zay. Really appreciate you and your generosity. Jay Willard, thank you for your generosity. Greatly appreciate you, Jay Willard, for blessing 5 new members of the MOBB with your memberships. Stand up. You are now officially in the building as, okay, I got it. As new members in the MOBB, and I really appreciate you, Jay Willard, for your generosity and your blessing. Mike Lowry writes, first of all, thank you for being a member for 10 months, who writes, he was talking about Noah, Lou, not Diami. Oh, he was talking about Noah Brown. I still think Diami, I guess you could call it a lateral move. I guess you could, theoretically speaking, if you look at the season that Noah Brown turned in last year, really his last 2 seasons equal to that of Jahan's last 2 seasons. So when you look at it from that prism and lens, yes, I would say it's a lateral move. It's not a backwards move. It's a lateral move. Because he's been just as productive as Jahan has been the last 2 seasons. So yeah, I'd say it's a lateral move. Sorry for the confusion there. I thought you were talking about Diami. See, that's what happens when you have multiple Browns on the team. So I dropped the ball there. Thank you for that clarity, Mike Lowry. Ralph, been a member for 2 months. Really appreciate you. Ralph writes, is Noah Brown an upgrade over Dotson? No, and that's what the super chat from Charles was asking about earlier. No, it's not an upgrade. I would say that it is a lateral move, which is what Charles was asking. And I think that's pretty accurate there. It is probably more of a lateral move. Now, if you look at the totality of what Noah Brown brings to the table from a blocking standpoint, can play special teams, he might offer you a little bit more. I think Jahan is more talented than he is, but it's all about production in this league. And Jahan hasn't been super productive, and Noah Brown has matched his productivity over the last 2 years. So I think it's a lateral move for now. We'll see how it all turns out. But I think Noah fits this team more than Jahan Dotson does. I can say that with 100% certainty. He fits the DNA profile of what Dan Quinn and company wants to do. And so it's a really good fit for year 1 of trying to set a culture here. Makes a lot of sense. Will Kavanaugh, stand up. You are the newest member of the MOBB. Greatly appreciate you, Will Kavanaugh. Mob, you know what to do. Show Will some love. Open your arms wide. Show him what it's like to be a member of the MOBB. Shout out to Will Kavanaugh. Welcome to the squad. Glad to have you on board. Swaggy P, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Swaggy P writes, check your DMs on Twitter, on X. It's about the survivor pool. I will do that. I know people are asking when will the sheets be available. I'm going to do that tomorrow. I'm going to have a video, letting everybody know that it's the portal is open, and that'll be the final call to action. Maybe I won't say final because I might do it once more next week, Wednesday or something like that. But I'll definitely check it out, see what's being said there in case somebody is having issues with something. I can help them out. But I will definitely take a look at my DMs on X. Appreciate that, Swaggy P. So with that said, that is going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on this installment of the Command Post Live. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. Until next time, I'm your man Louie T, signing off. I'll be back tomorrow with a brand new episode of the Louie T Network podcast to wrap up the month of August. A number of things have happened. I know you've been watching some of this college football, as have I. So we'll talk about a little bit of that. Brandon Ayuk got his new deal. I was going to talk about it here. I said I'm going to save it for the podcast. So we'll talk about that saga finally coming to a close and a number of different topics. I know you've seen Jerry Jones straight tripping, boo. I know you've seen it. He was talking cold, hard cash about Dak Prescott. And Dak was like, I ain't even trying to hear that shit. So much to talk about on the podcast. Hopefully you'll join me for that tomorrow, among other topics. I look forward to chopping it up with you then. Until then, you guys have a good one. God bless. Good night.